Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's HCMx Radio, the only podcast in the HCM arena that weaves current market research, HR technology, and industry leaders into each episode. Our HCMx Radio host is our Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook.
Hi, this is Rachel Cook. I'm the COO and host of Brandon Hall Group's HCMx Radio podcast. Our podcast covers all human capital management topics. We invite leaders from all over the world to share their expertise and points of view on what is happening in their workplace and their communities. I'd like to warmly welcome my friend Bonnie St. John from Blue Circle Leadership. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. We've done podcasts before, and today is the first time we're actually doing one on video over the internet, where we've done some through video at our conferences in the past. And for those of you that know Bonnie or may not know Bonnie, but I just want to give you a little bit of background about Bonnie St. John. She was the first African American ever to win medals in Winter Olympic competition, taking home a silver and 2 bronze medals at the 1984 Winter Paralympics in Innsbruck, Austria. Today, Bonnie travels the globe as a keynote speaker, maybe not so much traveling as she's accustomed to, but still doing a lot of virtual sessions and engagements through some of their programs that they have, and Bonnie can share a little bit more about what that looks like in a bit. She's an author of 7 books, a best-selling author. She's also graduated magna cum laude from Harvard, earned a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford, and served in the White House as a director of the National Economic Council during the Clinton administration. She's been featured extensively in both national and international media. NBC Nightly News called Bonnie one of the 5 most inspiring women in America. And, after knowing Bonnie for, more than a half a decade now, Bonnie's become not just a friend, we've collaborated on research, we've done several projects, research projects together, and, she's also become a mentor to me, and I really value our friendship and the time that we've had spent together and getting to know Bonnie and her team. So welcome today. And today we're going to be talking about some of the current events and around the pandemic, social injustice, and also the uncertainty as far as financial uncertainty that people are experiencing, and what does that look like in the workplace and how that is impacting people. And we're going to talk a little bit about, we're actually going to be doing a webinar on this later in August that we invite all of you to attend. But today is just to share a little bit about what we are going to be covering in more detail during the structured webinar. So Bonnie, can you share a little bit about your journey, personal and your career journey, before we start to talk about some of the client examples that you're seeing around what is happening in today's environment?
Yeah, well, it's really relevant because, we're seeing the Black Lives Matter issues play out, and I'm Black, and then, there's a lot of other things going on too. And I lost one of my legs when I was 5. It was a birth defect, and they amputated when I was 5. I grew up in San Diego, and I went on to become an international ski racer. You were saying I was the first African American to win medals in Winter Olympics. So it's a crazy story growing up in San Diego, and not only being Black, but my parents had no money. My father left before I was born. My mother was a school teacher. I like to joke that it's tough to ski on one leg, but it's really tough to ski with no money. So I had to raise a lot of money and find sponsors and be very entrepreneurial. Yeah, it's interesting in these times too, because we're looking at what's happening with Black Lives Matter and various discrimination, the challenges in COVID for Hispanic people or lower income people. And I sympathize with a lot of this. And then as a leader of a business that teaches leadership, I'm also looking at it from the client point of view too. And I guess just before we start getting into some of the issues for what's going on in corporate America right now, just to say that, growing up being the one-legged Black ski racer, it was challenging because often you don't know why things are happening, as if you're getting picked on in the ski circuit, is it just people being competitive, or are you being isolated because you're Black, or um, you know, how does being disabled come into play? There's a lot of different forms of discrimination, and a lot of times you don't even know why it's happening, and you start to question yourself or doubt yourself, and so it was tough to always be the different one.
I'm sure. And if I recall too, when you were starting to look at schools, and I thought it was fascinating, when you were looking at schools in Vermont to go to, you were raising money, you were determined that that's where you wanted to be. I think you only went skiing a couple of times. It wasn't even like you were, it wasn't even like you were a skilled athlete at the time in skiing.
Well, no, to be fair, and I know it's a confusing story, and there's a lot of stuff happened, but no, I had started racing. I had started skiing with a friend of mine from high school in San Diego with her family, and then I started training and racing with other amputees in Southern California. And then I found out about this school in Vermont. So I had started racing before I applied to go to a racing school. In fact, I had been to national championships, and I did better than I expected, and thought, wow, if I could get coaching, I could do really well. So I had been skiing, I had been racing, and then I had even gone to national championships before I signed up to go away to a boarding school for ski racers.
Okay, that makes sense.
It does make sense.
I do recall this was before the internet, when you were doing research on schools to go to, and you persevered, or you're so persistent in finding that information, sending away for it, and waiting for the catalog. It just didn't come instantaneous to you, where you could just go online, type in what you're looking for, send a chat or an email to someone. It took time, and so that is just, I think that describes who you are, and how you persevere through different moments of your life to get what you want and how you accomplish things. So I think that's kind of where I was going with that part of it. And I thought it was so fascinating because, if you think about today, yes, there's a lot of things happening, and we're going through a time of such uncertainty coming at us in every different direction, through the pandemic, through the rioting, through political campaigns, and different perspectives, and different I think positions of how people are, and it's coming to, I feel like, a bubble right now. It's going to burst. So, but how technology and the way that we have access to technology and information is faster than ever. Things are coming at us through the media. And I think for leaders in the workplace, it's very challenging because they don't know how to start these conversations, and they don't know, for some extent, we talked about politically correct or politically incorrect, and how that hasn't, that's not working. So I'd like to hear from you. Why do you think that that's not working, and what can we do in order to foster better communication and collaboration?
Well, I want to caution us against using the terminology that politically correct is broken. You didn't say that, so I'm sort of exaggerating what you said. Is we don't want to throw out politically correct and go, oh, that didn't work, let's throw it out. That there are a lot of people that are depending on it, because it can be about an etiquette, about being polite, right? So I don't want to say throw out being polite, doesn't matter anymore. I don't want people to take away that message. But I think it's not enough anymore, because politically correct was designed to sort of prevent problems. And I think in today's environment, when there's so much politically charged language going on in society, and we've got Black Lives Matter, and we've got, the virus, and so people are saying, from China or from Europe, there's a lot of sensitive subjects being talked about in the world, and so that comes into the workplace. So preventing problems and etiquette that prevents problems isn't going to address a lot of what's happening, because a lot of what's happening is way beyond the prevention part, as people are clashing on different points of view, or different sets of assumptions, or saying things that offend one group or another. And so it's we are starting to work more with methodologies that help you deal with what happens after you've had we call it like an identity collision. You know, you've collided from different points of view. So you're way beyond prevention. And even, I have to say with politically correct too, I think there's a sense that it's not just an etiquette system anymore. It's like a straitjacket. And I've even seen some people sort of beat other people over the head with it. You know, it's like shaming and blaming, you know, with politically correct. And that's not helping us to create more collaboration. That's not bringing us close together. So whether it's just etiquette that is broken down, or you know, the idea that it's turned into something that is driving against collaboration, you know, that is blaming and shaming and embarrassment and all that, we need something else. And so that's what we've been looking at, Blue Circle Leadership as a company, is how can we give people tools that help in this environment that's much more difficult.
And you talk about 6 steps that help you start that conversation. What is that? What does that look like?
Well, I want to, before we jump into the 6 steps, I just want to say that we're seeing this everywhere. And so it's not just about companies that have a lot of minorities. I had one company come to us that the head of the sales department, it's a national sales organization, white male, and he when we started talking, he said, most of my sales force is white males too, but I want to do something with them to help them be more sensitive with what's going on. You know, we've got this crazy dialogue going around, not only just the nation, but around the world. You know, how do I help my people to grapple with this? And so he doesn't have a lot of minorities on his team, but he still wanted to be able to have the conversation. I mean, and then on the flip side, we have a lot of companies where they do have a lot of minorities, and they want to be able to have this conversation and give people tools to be able to discuss it without sticking your foot in your mouth. I joke, I only have one leg. I'm an amputee, right? But I can stick it in my mouth. I'm really good at sticking it in my mouth. And I think we all are, you know, nobody is perfect. And so expecting people to be perfect is impossible. So what do we do once we screw up? You know, how do we deal with what is and how complicated this is? And I also think it's not just about Black versus white. You know, there's a lot of talk about Black Lives Matter, but it's also, you know, LGBT, or, you know, and you and I have dealt on women's issues because you run a women's conference with Brandon Hall, which is a terrific women's conference, by the way. Can we do a plug for the women's conference? But you and I have talked more about women's issues. And I was thinking about that as we have gotten started, is we've been friends for many years, as you said, but this conversation we're having today, we've never had before. And I think that's indicative of what's going on in our country, is that even people who know each other really well at work or in families or in communities, we're having very different conversations because of what's going on in society at large. And so we are now confronted with talking about issues of race, talking about issues of immigration, or you know, all kinds of things, and sexual orientation, all the differences that we have. And so that we're much more confronted by those things than we used to be. And so you and I are getting to have this conversation that we've never had before.
And even when we were talking about women's topics and helping women advance, or the disparity in gender equality in the workplace, diversity always came up. And diversity was more the prevailing issue about being inclusive. It wasn't necessarily always about just women, what we were finding. And I think that's what led this year. We were going to have, instead of just having women in leadership, we were going to have a diversity and inclusion summit to open it up and to be more inclusive for everyone. Because what we find, even when you're focusing on women topics, you can't change the system. You can't change the policies without bringing in men. And by doing so, it's not just about women, because what we find, you know, I don't think it's just Black or white, as you said, because even everybody's diverse to some extent, whether it's where you're from. I mean, very few people in the United States are just only white or only American anymore, or just, you know, Black, I feel. And even myself, my mother's Spanish, my dad is Russian, my mother's family is Catholic, my dad's family is Jewish. So like there's so much diversity in me. And growing up in Queens, New York, I was around a lot of diversity. And so I never looked at some of these issues or topics the way that I'm seeing them now. So it's kind of eye-opening to me. And I'm trying to understand this through our research, through our clients' lens, through working with you and others that have different perspectives and experiences. And I think that's we have.
Go ahead.
I think that's where we need to come, is to be more inclusive and more understanding and accepting. And I think that's where some of the problems are starting, that we see where there's that conflict and that clash, is that lack of understanding. What do you think from your experience and what you're seeing?
And have you heard of the term insiders and outsiders? I don't know if we've talked about this before. So this is not something I created, but it's something in the industry that gets talked about. And so instead of saying majorities and minorities, right? Because women are not a minority, so it doesn't make sense. It's more about power dynamics, right? So insiders are, you know, the people who are the norm, the people who have the power. And I like to even say, you know, look at the idea of left-handed versus right-handed, because that's less loaded than talking about women and men and white and Black. You know, it's just left-handed and right-handed. If you're right-handed, everything in society is designed for you: the scissors, the paper, the desks, you know. And if you ask left-handed people, you know, what are some of the things you struggle with? It's really interesting. I would encourage people to do that, is ask left-handed people, what are the things I don't know about what you have to deal with? And that's kind of an interesting metaphor, because men often don't know what it is women have to deal with at work. You know, they don't understand about women getting hit on or getting ignored or having their ideas taken in a meeting. You know, there's all these little things that we deal with that they don't necessarily see. And the same thing if you're white in society, and society is, you know, American society is the norm is the majority is white. And so if you're Black or you're Hispanic or you're Asian, you know, there's all these things you have to deal with that you might not see if you were white. And I think that's what's been interesting about the Black Lives Matter movement recently, is I'm seeing that it's so much more salient to my white friends than it used to be. And I think it might be because of the pandemic, and we all slowed down enough. People aren't packing up for summer vacations, and you know, everybody's, you know, sitting still more, and so they've seen more and they've absorbed more. And so it's just much more salient. So the insiders outsiders metaphor, I think, is helpful, because it's not about, you know, you could be an insider on one dimension and an outsider on another dimension. You know, so it's our identities are complicated, and being a woman could be an outsider in one situation and an insider in another situation. And so I think it's a helpful, sort of less loaded way of talking about the power dynamics that come into play in different situations.
Well, it'll be interesting in about 50 years when we ask men that are going through this time, where they feel more on the, maybe some are understanding and some probably are on the defense and trying to figure out what they should do, what they shouldn't do, what they should say, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. I think they're navigating to some extent. So it'll be interesting to see when they look back in this period, what they've learned and how they've evolved, and along with everything else that's happening.
And that's a great segue into this idea of identity collisions. It's helpful because when you talk about politically correct, it was sort of designed to protect one group from the other group. So people who are, quote, minorities or outsiders on various dimensions to be protected against insiders. Whereas this idea of identity collision, it can happen to anyone. And what you just described is that in the environment, especially when it pertains to like Black Lives Matter, I think a lot of white men are feeling like they're attacked. You know, they're feeling like their identity is being threatened, you know, or being questioned, you know, about, are you a good person? I mean, and again, to give a different metaphor, you know, if a woman walks into a room and hears a guy telling a joke about women or something, and she calls him out on it and says, you know, how dare you do that? He could feel attacked, like, wait a minute, I've done all kinds of things to promote women, and you know, I do this, and he may be a really good person, but he just told this one joke that might have been a little off, but he feels his whole identity is being questioned, right? And so we this idea of identity collisions, of having a moment where you feel like your identity is being called into question, or you're being told that you're doing something wrong on a deeper level, and you feel threatened for that, then you can get defensive, and you might even start to sort of attack back. And so this idea that any of us can feel that, you can feel it as a woman, as a man, black or white, you can feel like there's a challenge to your identity and your self-worth. And how do we deal with that? And it does tend to ricochet. So in the example I just gave too, if a woman walks into a room and she's hearing the joke and she's feeling her identity is threatened, so she gets mad and she lashes out, then the man feels like, wait a minute, mine's threatened too. So these collisions happen, and it's not just one side that feels attacked. Both sides can easily feel attacked.
Very true. And so, Bonnie, tell me a little bit about, you developed this methodology, or this guide to communicating in opening up or starting the conversation that can collaborate better, better communication or collaboration. What are those?
We put it into 6 steps, and I have to say we've built that on literature and other things that are out there. And we can share our references for that and where we get it from, but we boiled it down into the 6 steps that we use. And so I can just tell those really quickly. As you said at the beginning, we're going to do a webinar where we really take people through and teach them how to use these 6 steps and give them some handles on it. But I can just quickly summarize for you is the first step is just to pause and de-escalate. You know, is that our fight or flight reactions can kick in. You know, if you feel like you're being insulted or your identity is being questioned, you know, whether you're a man or woman or black or white or whatever, you get angry, and there's a whole physiological reaction. It's called an amygdala hijack. It's our fight or flight, and literally we lose access to our prefrontal cortex. So our caveman reactions kick in. And, you know, I notice a lot of times I've interviewed a lot of people about this kind of thing, and afterwards they'll say like, oh, that wasn't me. That reaction just wasn't me. And there's some truth to that, because if you're losing access to your higher order brain functions, it's like this caveman came out and reacted. And, you know, our brain does that for self-preservation. If you, you know, if there was a fire, or in a primitive world, if the next village was coming to attack your village, you know, you don't need to be thinking complicated thoughts. You need to run, or you need to hit something. But those reactions aren't appropriate in these subtle kinds of complex situations. And so stopping, the first step is just to stop and de-escalate these physiological reactions that we have that can prevent us from using our higher order thinking. As you know, I wrote a book called Micro Resilience, and we talk about specific techniques that help you to de-escalate an amygdala hijack. And it can be deep breathing, muscle relaxation. There's a technique called labeling your feelings. You know, there's a number of things we can do. So again, we could get into that in more detail. But the second step is to find, so once you sort of calm yourself down and get your physiological reaction in check, find common values and a purpose, a basis that is going to build stronger relationships. A lot of people jump over this step and sort of assume it. So I mentioned at the outset this scenario where a woman walks into a room and hears her coworkers maybe telling an off-color joke about women. And rather than stopping and saying, you know, let's establish a basis of what we have in common, she might just get angry, you know, or you know, the situation could be reversed too. But if you can stop and think about, what is our common value? What do we have in common? So in that situation, say it was a business and they have customers, and some of their customers are maybe led by women managers or women business owners. And so, you know, she could stop and say, gosh, if I walked into this room and saw this, what if one of our customers walked in and saw this too? Is how would that hurt all of us, you know? And so it's pulling people back to a common set of values. It's reminding people why this is important to all of us. This is not just me getting mad at you. This is important to all of us. And I think we often assume that that's true without creating that energy, right? And so the second step is to just stop and say, let's remind each other that we have a common reason for caring about this. Step 3 is to ask yourself, what is my role in this? How am I part of the cause of this? And that's so hard for people to do, I think, because we don't want to think we're the cause of it. I think that the knee-jerk reaction is to prove that I'm not racist, I'm not sexist, I'm not like this, you know. And so stopping to say, wait a minute, how could I have helped make this worse? And what could I do to make it better? So what are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? So instead of just, if we were going to get biblical, instead of looking for the speck of dust in somebody else's eye, you know, what is the brick in my own eye? Step 4 is to get other perspectives. So, you know, maybe you have this thing that happens in a moment at work, but when you get a chance to step away, is who can you consult to talk about it and ask questions and maybe get more expanded perspective? So again, what it would be really easy to do is to have a conflict like that at work and then to go home and talk to people who are just like you. So if you're a guy, you know, you could be saying to the other guys, you won't believe what this woman said to me at work. Boy, was she crazy, you know, and they'll all buy you a beer and agree. Or the woman, you know, goes back to her woman friends and goes, oh, he's such a pig, you know, and they go, yes, you're right, you know. So instead of just talking to people who confirm your point of view, how can you make a point of talking to people who can help you expand your point of view and see the other point of view more clearly? So again, each of these steps we can go into at more length, and we're going to be having a webinar later in the month where we can do that and help people understand how to implement these steps at work and what some of the pitfalls are. But it's helpful just to go through it. So step 5 is to really make space for other people to share their point of view and to let them know you really care. So again, instead of just shaming and blaming other people for not knowing the right answer or doing the right thing automatically, how can you make space to say, hey, you know, we could have a further dialogue about this? Actually, here's a funny example. I wasn't thinking about using this one, but in my church, I go to church in a very small rural town, and where I live, which I live in a small rural town. And one Sunday, they have a point in the service where they say everybody can stand up and talk about their prayer requests or what's going on for them. And I stood up and I said, you know, I think I'm the only Black person in my church. And nobody disagreed, so I'm still pretty confident that I'm the only Black person in my church because I live in a rural area. And I said, there's a lot of racial talk going on. I just want to say that, you know, I'm part of this community. This is a family for me. And if anybody wants to have an uncomfortable conversation about this and why it's happening and what some of the conversations are, I'm happy to do that. I'll do that. So I made space. I invited people to share their perspective and their experiences. And that ultimately led to the church scheduling a lunch where everybody could come and we could have a real conversation. And they even invited a couple of other people to come and speak. And it led to greater understanding and connection. So all of this is about using friction or a collision and taking that as an opportunity. How can you help that to deepen the relationships instead of sabotaging the relationships? So again, it's a faith-based example, but that's one example of being able to do that. And we do that with companies all the time too, is helping them use these steps to take what could be collisions, and especially now that there's so much conflicting information in the news, and being able to use that to deepen the relationship. So the last step that we have in the 6-step process is to identify actions that you can take. So commit to joint constructive action. Like we said, having a brown bag lunch where you can really bring different points of view and have a non-threatening, non-blaming discussion that allows everybody to build connection as opposed to just burrowing into their own positions and feeling defensive. Is that helpful?
Yes, I like that that you opened up and you had that lunch in your community and you gave them an opportunity to ask you questions and get your point of view. Did you find any of their beliefs or was there anything that made you think or have another perspective about some of your original thinking about certain things, or how how did how was
Hopefully it
it?
opened up everybody's points of view, and everybody got to hear some things that they had never heard before. It you know, I'm a professional that works with corporations in this area, and so I wasn't there to teach a seminar. So I was there to create space for people to talk to each other and help each other. And I wasn't even the facilitator of that. I sort of helped the facilitators to do it. So we didn't solve the problems, but people got to hear each other's point of view, and it did make me realize that there's a long way to go. That there are big differences in perception about what's happening in this country, and I think it's important for leaders to recognize that and to create the environment where people who have very different perspectives about what's happening to come together and to be able to appreciate one another's point of view and move forward and collaborate more. It used to be in the workplace, we kind of said, well, leave those issues outside the door, just come to work and do your work. And again, I think that's one of the reasons why politically correct isn't able to address all of these problems. And I said at the beginning, it doesn't mean we're going to throw politically correct out. It just means that we can't rely on it to solve all of this, because we can't just not talk about it and expect our work relationships to function.
Right, we're not supposed to talk about religion, politics. And what is the third one?
Sex, yeah. So,
There you go.
but yeah, it's an interesting time, and I think the opportunity is for us to deepen our relationships and get
Mhm.
more understanding of one another's perspectives and where people are coming from. I think most people mean well, and they want to have deeper connections, but when they feel attacked, they're going to shut down, and then we don't build good relationships. And it's interesting. I gave an example too of customers. You know, that with one company we're working with, it's not even about just relationships between their employees. You know, it's also they're aware that they need to not offend their customers, but it's also just not it's also not about not offending. It's about understanding. You know, is creating greater understanding with what people are going through. I do think we have a tremendous opportunity here to make progress and to create greater understanding and deeper connectedness because of this. You know, I hear people talking about issues that we never used to talk about. So I do think there's a real opportunity for us all to grow together. And the kind of leaders that are tuned into this podcast are the kind of people who care. You know, it's mainly folks in HR, right? And some of them are having to deal with this stuff that's bubbling up at work. Or if you have a group of particularly if you have Black employees, or I think if you have Asian employees and they're getting, I've heard about harassment against Asian employees because they're blamed for the Asian disease, you know, but also Black employees, and just giving them support for what they're going through, and then giving the white leaders support for how do you deal with this, that, you know, I may be uncomfortable, I may not know what to say. And so I think we all need tools at a time like this.
Agreed. And we'll talk more about this during our next webinar in August. I believe it's scheduled for August when is it? August the 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We hope to see you all there. The topic is courageous humility, leading with resilience in these challenging times. And so Bonnie will go into more detail about the methodology and how to use the methodology. We'll also share some current research that we have. We have a diversity and inclusion annual survey that is open to take, so we invite you to participate in our research. We've done this annually, and we use this information, the survey, and also we interview a lot of organizations to gather insights, best practices around programs and initiatives that they have in place to help in all areas of human capital management, and diversity and inclusion is one important one, amongst other areas such as leadership, talent, learning. And so, you know, as companies evolve and our current times evolve, we see such an integration with everything, with learning, talent, leadership, diversity. You really can't do one well without encompassing all facets of how people, how they learn, how they think, how they feel, and what does it mean to be authentic and bring your true self to the workplace. And so with that in mind, I think that's why we're here, is really to kind of raise the conversation, the awareness, and hopefully come together and unite and not divide. You know, we can't divide as a nation. You know,
No,
if
and
anything
I think
about it, we have to be united.
yeah, I think
move.
it's for corporations. I think it's you know, particularly they can't deliver for our customers when we're divided. And
Right.
I think there are people in the political landscape right now that are pushing divisions and differences to gain their own following. But in corporations, you just can't do that. You know, you've got to be a uniter. You've got to pull everyone together. And so I do think we're really seeing corporations as some of the engine of really bringing us together, which I think is so great. And, you know, we have diverse workforces, and, you know, we need to bring everyone along. I think it's great if they can come in August. We can definitely go in more detail. But until then, too, if they can go to your website at Brandon Hall, right? And we've got a link there where they can download just these 6 steps that I talked about if they want to get started on it now, right? Where do they go on your website for that?
We'll be sending it out to everybody, but you can find our podcast at www.brandonhall.com/HCMx podcast. And we also have it in our research membership center. We'll be sending it out to our database, and so we'll have several different publications from our talk today, one with our blog with a link to the recording and video, along with an executive interview of our discussion.
Great. I want to invite people to connect with me on LinkedIn too, Bonnie St. John on LinkedIn. And if you want to get it there too, you can ask for it there. I just want to make it really easy for people to get these 6 steps to download, so that they can start working on it now, and then hopefully join the conversation. And, you know, if you take the 6 steps and you start putting it in practice now, you can come to that dialogue in August with questions and say, hey, I tried this and this was hard. Because there are some things about these 6 steps that are not easy. And so we're going to be able to get into some of the subtleties of what can go wrong, and, you know, troubleshoot how to use it, and you know, important safety tips. So if you start thinking about this and trying it before then, even better, you can come to the discussion with some concrete questions.
That would be great, and that is so true. Some of this is not easy. It takes practice, it takes discipline, and it takes experience to be able to kind of understand kind of what triggers you, and especially at that emotional level where you may not be your best self, and you really have to take time when you feel like you are being attacked, or you feel like you are not on the same page as somebody else based on your beliefs and your experiences. So it's really important to think about it, and think about the, you know, even if your heart is in the right place, you don't want to come across.
Yeah. It's you know, you're going to have, even if your heart is completely in the right place, you can still have challenges. It's not necessarily going to be easy. Actually, as you know, I'm known for the story that I tell about being in the Paralympics, and I was racing in the slalom, and I fell down. I was ahead in the first run on the slalom, and then in the second run, I fell and got up and got over the finish line. And I was in first place, but I ended up getting the bronze medal. And I realized afterwards that the woman who won the gold, she had also fallen down in the second run. There was this really bad icy spot in the second run. And I had skied faster than her when nothing went wrong. So how did she beat me? She just got up faster, right? And I think that's relevant to what we're talking about, because this kind of situation where we're talking about Black Lives Matter and political differences and global pandemic, and everything that's going on, it's not easy to just solve it by saying I did everything right and nothing went wrong. We are all going to be falling down and getting up. And so it is all about giving people tools to get up a little faster. The only way to win in this world today is to it's not that you're never going to fall down. You got to get up a little faster. So that's what we're going to be talking about in August, is giving you tools to not make all your problems go away, but to be able to address these and use them as an opportunity to deepen our relationships, improve our teams, improve our productivity at work, and come out of this stronger than we went into it.
And that's why I find storytelling and sharing your personal experience so powerful, because it really opens your eyes to different people, different ways of life, different experiences, different careers. So I've always found, and I inspire, or I really try to strive to push people to do this when they come to our events or they come to our webinars, whether they're live, virtual, to really share, yes, talk about whatever the topic we're talking about, if it's succession planning or leadership development, but bring to life your story, your experience, the people that you work with, the clients you work with, whether it's your internal employees or your clients that you're helping outside, because that's what makes it powerful. And I think really good leaders and really good practitioners are the ones that can bring that story and then inspire others and leave something for others to feel, not only yourself feel good about, but help others feel good too. And that's so important.
That's what we all do. And I love that the kind of audience that is tuned into this, your audience is really cares about bringing out the best in everyone and helping our corporations to get stronger and compete and win. So I'm excited to be on your team. I just want to reiterate to people, connect with me on LinkedIn if you like. We're going to share this extra resource before the August event, so you can start trying the 6 steps. So you can get it from me on LinkedIn, or go back to where you signed up for this podcast and get it as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, everybody, for listening, watching us today, and we will see you in August, if not sooner. Stay safe, healthy.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Wear a mask. We don't have to today because we're in our own little bubbles, so we're fine. All right, take care. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.